30 years since the release of Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, the film that was supposed to kickstart a new franchise, but which ended up crashing and burning at the box office. Time has been kind to it though, and now it has a number of fans who recognise it as a solid entry in the series, particularly in the wake of a number of uninspired and sometimes just plain weird follow-up entries. And yes, the next generation, we are looking at you right now. The behind-the-scenes turmoil of the making of the film throws some light on how it ended up the way it did, so let's take a look at how it went down. In September 1988, David J. Scowl, working on his first feature, is asked to pitch his ideas for the script for Nightmare on Elm Street 5. With no feature writing experience, the job eventually went to writing team and fellow splatterpunk writers John Skipp and Craig Spector, who would end up recognising only one line from their script making it into the finished film, which Scowl, among others, later actually did rewrites on. However, as a result of his Nightmare pitch, Scowl was also asked to pitch his ideas for a third instalment in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. A couple of months later, after delivering the script for an episode of Freddy's Nightmares, an executive from New Life Cinema approached and contracted him to write the movie. Scowl inherited an existing plot outline from original creators Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel that the studio was already working with, describing it as such. Scowl created his draft, including a gruesome semi-reveal of what Leatherface looks like under the mask, and handed it in on March 11th, 1989. The producer of the film says to Scowl, "You're a very sick man, Scowl, keep it up." At this point, the intention was to write a film chasing the X rating, and to then revise down the violence in the next few drafts. New Line, looking to bring Texas Chainsaw Massacre on board now as their new franchise hope, did not think the same way, and started to send memos insisting that certain elements are toned down, which included Alfredo's dialogue, which was seen as extremely offensive, as well as losing a scene that could be seen to create sympathy for Leatherface. In May, another revision was completed, and at this time the movie was still aiming for a filming start date in June. There was, however, still the small matter of having no director attached. Directors originally in the frame included Tom Savini, John McNaughton and Peter Jackson. New Line was so keen on Jackson after seeing the just-released Bad Taste that they also offered him the Freddy franchise. June 13th saw John Butel hired as director. Butel at the time was already credited as the writer of The Last Starfighter, My Science Project, and was just coming off directing 2 episodes of Freddy's Nightmares. 3 days later, June 16th, and Butel is no longer in the director's chair. This is reportedly due to contractual reasons with 20th Century Fox, who were working on the Alien Nation TV series at the time. Jeff Burr, director of another horror sequel, Stepfather 2, is given the opportunity to come on board. The start date for filming then moves to mid-July. The release date, however, was still locked in place, and the director found himself already up against an incredibly tight schedule. So tight, in fact, that he had no involvement with the notorious Excalibur trailer, which was already playing before the Nightmare on Elm Street 5. Indeed, he didn't even see the trailer until watching Nightmare 5 in a cinema.
Some tales are told, then soon forgotten. But a legend is forever. Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
The studio was continually working backwards. The release date had already been locked, theatres were booked, and the film was still set for November 3rd, 1989, in an attempt to capture the lucrative Halloween crowd. The movie had to be finished by then, and the studio would not delay the release or spend any more time in prep. With no more time available, Burr could only prep the first third of the film. The remaining 2/3 couldn't be completed before filming started, not only because of the rush to hit the release date, but also because the sets had not been built yet. Already under intense time pressure, the producers and Burr then began to mandate further script rewrites, which did not go down well with Scowl. As the person who coined the term splatterpunk, and known for a gory, violent, rebellious writing style at the time, Scowl had already found New Line keen to water down his work once the execs realised that a franchise could be built around the series. To add to the pressure, the Elm Street series had reached a level of sequel fatigue that had just peaked when the audience for Part 5, The Dream Child, failed to materialise, and the studio became much more desperate for something new to create a reliable revenue stream. In his production diary, published in Fangoria magazine at the time, Scow claims that Burr and the producer revamped most of the dialogue over the course of just a week. After a memo was circulated saying the script was being further gutted due to budget costs, Burr is then quoted about the changes in an interview with Gorezone. At least casting had gone well, to a degree. Originally, the team planned to bring back Gunnar Hansen in the role of Leatherface to make this feel like a true sequel and potentially ignore the events of the second movie. New Line, however, only offered Hansen scale pay, which understandably he considered an insult, and, unable to agree a fee, Hansen walked away. Burr then suggested actor R.A. Mihailov for the role of Leatherface after he appeared in the director-student film. The 6'3" actor is a perfect replacement for Leatherface, and indeed his performance in the film is one of the highlights. Also, Viggo Mortensen auditioned for the part of Tex, but, as the story goes, did an audition so bad he didn't initially get the part. The director has since clarified that it was never due to the quality of Mortensen's work, but that the producers had another actor that they wanted, and who was briefly cast as Tex. That actor then also booked a high-paying commercial that would have conflicted with the first day of shooting the movie. Then, given an ultimatum to choose one project or the other, the actor chose the commercial. Mortensen was then finally cast as Tex. With the rewrites completed and the cast in place, filming began as planned in California on July 17th. The director and crew now faced additional obstacles due to the filming location chosen by the studio and not being able to film in Texas and in 16mm as Burr originally intended. Scow, as usual pulling no punches, related the first day of shooting in his production diary. To his credit, Scow has at least one good thing to say about the production. Filming in California on a ranch, the production not only had the noise from Six Flags Magic Mountain amusement park less than a mile down the road infiltrating some shots, but a series of forest fires during filming prompted the crew to scramble and work hard to get the burnt forest out of the shots, even going to the extreme of not lighting the background so that the burnt out trees would not be visible.
Sir, why don't you just use real cows?
Cows don't look like cows on film. You gotta use horses.
What do you do if you want something that looks like a horse?
Usually we just tape a bunch of cats together.
Added to this, the producers' insistence on shooting in California rather than Texas meant that they were filming the mainly at-night shoot on the shortest nights of the year, leaving the crew even less time to capture everything that was needed. Whole effects sequences were cut during filming due to further budget cuts, or that just refused to work properly. The death of Sarah was originally intended to be much more gruesome, with her being bisected up against the tree, but the effect was never able to be convincingly pulled off. The producers were coming down on Burr for even the smallest of things at the risk of overrunning or going over budget, even demanding to see the director's shot list for each day, or be fired. At the end of the original filming schedule, the producers extended the shooting by a couple of days, but Burr was still fired anyway. Then, unable to find a director willing to step in and finish the last few shots, he was rehired. New Line demanded that they go back to refilm the opening scenes with a different actress playing Gina being killed by Leatherface. This involved rebuilding a long destroyed portion of set, rehiring props, and further delays to the shoot, all of which was out of Burr's hands. 2 days later, finally, on August 29th, filming was complete. After a successful test screening, the head of foreign sales at New Line broke everyone's hearts by saying he couldn't possibly sell the movie anywhere and that it was going to get banned in every territory. At this point, everybody panicked, and even some New Line executives stated their hatred for the movie, saying they found it sick and offensive. At this point, it would seem New Line realised that having asked for a Texas Chainsaw movie, what they ended up with is a Texas Chainsaw movie. Michael DeLuca, the head of New Line, even allegedly removed the scenes they had the most issue with prior to submitting the film for certification. Now, in the 90s, the MPAA were a particular opponent to the horror industry, having had many run-ins with New Line while rating the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, particularly the last installment. The MPAA also had a target on the Texas Chainsaw series after the second part decided to release with no rating at all. They initially gave Texas Chainsaw 3 an X rating, with no indication of how or even if an R rating was possible for the film. An X rating, which after Texas Chainsaw became the NC-17 cert, would mean the film couldn't be advertised in the majority of newspapers, and most theatres would refuse to play it. With Burr contractually obligated to provide an R-rated feature, and with no guidance on what changes to make to achieve the rating, the studio recut the film 11 times, including removing individual frames at a time in an attempt to lessen the impact the film had. Of particular concern at the MPAA was the inclusion of the young girl being intimately involved in the violence of the film, a key part of the midsection of the movie.
No, please don't. Not again. You promised. The next one was mine. Let me do it.
The time it took to eventually gain the required R rating meant the film missed its original release date. New Line took advantage of the delay to tinker with the film again, unknown to its director. At further test screenings held without Burr's involvement, the Ken Foree character got high ratings, and New Line wanted to now keep him alive for the next movie. Working without Burr, they shot a new ending which changed from Foree's character definitively getting a chainsaw through the brain to the saw merely somehow grazing his head. The new ending also resurrected Leatherface and Alfredo's characters for a revised ending, which neither the writer or director would be satisfied with. For unknown reasons, this ending also removed the final encore death of Tex, who in the original ending is impaled on one of the family's own woodland traps. The finished film was eventually released in January 1990, traditionally then a dumping ground for films expected to perform poorly. The film opened at number 11 at the box office and would still end up being banned across Europe, and especially in one of New Line's key countries there, the UK. The studio apparently unaware that the first two chapters in the series were also still banned at the time and unavailable to the general public. Scow was also called out in Fangoria's letters page shortly before the release by the director's friend, fellow writer-director C. Courtney Joyner, for what was seen as unwarranted and unfair criticism of Burr's involvement in the production and rewriting of Scow's script. Even actor William Butler wrote in to support Burr and the production in general. Scow, in his rebuttal, was unrepentant and did not agree with how his articles had been interpreted by Joyner in Scow's usual headstrong fashion. These days, of course, the film is freely available, even in the UK, featuring uncut, high-def Blu-ray quality along with deleted scenes, and a making-of that's not afraid to cover some of this production strife, with some of the major players happy to sit down and discuss the ups and downs of the whole process. Being a horror fan these days is a lot easier than it was back then.
About here.
Where?
Middle of nowhere.
Looks like you had a little mishap.
They hunt people. They really hunt them. They trap them and they kill them.
What kind of sick shit is this?